Hey guys, KRX50 here with another review. This time I'll be reviewing the Elec module Deluxe Billy the Rod from Kamen Rider Forza. This is the module used by Forza in Elec state and includes two things: Billy the Rod and one Astro Switch. So what we have here is Billy the Rod, aka the Elec module. Design-wise, it to a degree resembles an electric hedge trimmer, with a long cutting blade here, a handle for holding onto it, and a plug attached to the base. What we primarily have here is a bunch of this nice color of gold plastic. It's a vibrant gold that's pleasing to the eye and not really blinding. Mixing it up, we have some black some black paint, a little bit of white paint, some red, some silver, and a different color of gold here at the tip, as well as the main blade being made out of crescent black plastic. Since this is the rod, this is a little bit less of a blade and more of a shaft. You also got these three plugs here, which, with this plug, well, these three sockets, which, along with this plug, are basically the main gimmick of this toy, which I'll go into later. An interesting thing to note is that the white plastic here and here is, well, the white paint here and here is not quite the same as normal paint. It doesn't quite feel smooth, instead it feels a little bit chalky, which is interesting. I don't know if I've ever had any other toys from Bandai that have had this kind of paint on them. You've also got a switch socket right down here, which will also come into play later. Packaged separately from Billy the Rod is this, which is the ignition plug. It's a pretty simple thing made out of partly hard plastic and partly flexible plastic. It can bend and flex, and it's got a kind of consistency that actually kind of makes it feel like it's an actual electric cord. This is where it plugs in. It just plugs in like that. And when not in use, you've got this port here, which plugs onto this tab here. And to remove it, you just squeeze in these two tabs and pull off. You've got the on and off switch here and the speaker right here, as well as some kind of turbine-like detailing on the back. Of course, what would be a module without a switch? And for this we have number 10, the Elec switch, Elec being short for electric. What you'll immediately notice is that, unlike other switches I've shown before, this is not made out of translucent black plastic, but rather translucent yellow plastic. It also has a little bit of paint, has gold to indicate here that's a circle switch, same red arrow, and the gold actually matches the gold on these two sides. The cigarette's got the number 10 with a lightning bolt in the background, and to activate this switch you just flip this on its hinge all the way forward like so. Then it can flip back in place like that, because it works on a spring. Now this switch is unique because, unlike past switches, this both gives Forza a module and activates a state change. Now I'll go into what states are right now. So for Forza, the main gimmick is the Astro switches and the modules. However, like past riders, he does have form changes. In this case, his forms are called states. And what he starts out in is called base state, while the Elec switch turns him into Elec state, which is an electric-based form. Now the thing about state changes are, not only do they give him a new module and change up his armor, but they also change the composition of his suit. In the case of Elec state, it changes his suit to an electric-proof material. So I'll now show off this in the Forza driver, which I've got right here. It's already on, so I'll activate the transformation. Just moving this back. So, since this is a circle switch, we'll remove the rocket switch here. Then plug in Elec. And switch it on. So, with that we had something different. Instead of a sound of what the module would make, of a kind of sound that the module would make, we get a tune, plus the central part of the status monitor, which is normally white, has converted to yellow for Elec state. However, we can also activate other switches, like drill, and I'll activate with white. Now, while we have Elec and drill on, you can activate a special attack with these two. That activates the limit break rider electro drill kick. Well, the full thing is rider denko drill kick. And denko can translate to a few different things. I don't quite remember it. I mean, it's either something like electro or lightning. I'll probably put in what the translation is in an annotation around the screen. Now, this also goes into the nature of the modules. For Forza, his modules are stored in 4 ports on his limbs, called module basements. And since there are 40 switches in total, it can be assumed that each basement contains 10 modules. However, for state switches, like the Elec switch, it actually changes the basement and corresponding hand to match the rest of the suit. So it turns the module basement on Forza's right arm into the golden Earth basement. And what this also means is that in order to stay in Elec state, he can't change his circle switch, but he still has the ability to change the other 3 switches. And so for now, I'm going to keep the switch on and in the driver, which you'll see why later. So now we can get on to the electronic features of Billy the Rod. I'll turn on here, and it'll have some lights to start it up, as well as sound. So as you can see, there are 4 LEDs along the shaft. While the ignition plug isn't plugged into any of the 3 sockets, Billy the Rod makes this sound. And as you can see, nothing's happening in the shaft. Now what you've got here are these 3 sockets. Each one has a different number, indicated by lightning bolts on the side. For this one it's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. These activate different attacks, depending on which the ignition plug is plugged into. So with the first socket, this activates an electric shock attack, which electrifies the blade and basically adds electricity to his strikes. For the second socket, that activates a lightning cut attack, which allows Forza to send slash waves from the shaft of Billy the Rod. And for the third socket, that activates an electromagnetic net attack, allowing him to capture enemies using a manipulatable electromagnetic rope that can turn into things like a whip or a net. And as you can also see, depending on which socket the ignition plug is plugged into, it changes the sounds and the pattern on the shaft. Now, one of the questions this does kind of raise is why something would need to be plugged into itself. And I think I've actually figured it out, at least in the context of the show, with a little help from what's been seen on this toy. With the plug not plugged in, there are no lights and nothing that sounds electric about the sound that it makes. It only sounds like there's actual electricity in the shaft when the ignition plug is in one of the sockets. And what I get out of this is that on its own, the shaft has no electric power in it. Instead, the electric power for Billy the Rod is stored down here. And so the ignition plug transfers power from what's basically the battery of Billy the Rod to the shaft through these sockets, which act as power converters, changing the way it's used on the shaft. And with those shown, I can now show you the limit break for Billy the Rod itself. So here's where the Elec switch comes in. Now, going by the instructions, you just take the Elec switch and plug it into here. But to be so accurate, you take the ignition plug and plug it into the first socket. Then take it and plug it into here. Like so. That activates Elec State's main limit break, the Rider 10 billion volt break. Now, one thing to note is that after activating it, Billy the Rod will go back to whatever setting it originally was on. Meaning that in order to activate the limit break again, you have to unplug the switch and replug it. If left alone, it'll actually keep doing the charging sequence until you pull the trigger. It also doesn't actually matter which socket you have the plug in. This basically overrides the function of any of the three sockets. But makes more sense to have the ignition plug plugged in while doing the limit break, because basically what that can be seen as the Elec switch supercharges the plug's power and sends an extra surge into the shaft for the limit break. So that's actually pretty interesting. Billy the Rod is a really cool toy. It's got really interesting ideas, and the idea, especially the idea of basically changing the mode of attack using one activator and 3 different positions. The Elec switch is also a nice addition to any Astro Switch collection, as it is the first state switch and does stand out for its design and color. While you can get the Elec switch via other methods like Gashapon and Candy Toys, if you're going to get the Elec Switch, I would definitely suggest getting it along with Billy the Rod, because it really is a fun toy, a good roleplay toy, and a nice first weapon for Forza to have. So, definitely recommended. Please rate, comment, subscribe, and check out my channel for more videos. And for now, this is KRX50, writing off.